Ready?
We're trying to be close. Carol was offended last time about the space that we tried.
Pushing Stuart out the door.
My vote is yes. Ryan, 30 seconds. 30 seconds.
I can drag it to 30. Okay, write that down.
Brian's posting up and down. He's ready to go. Good to go? Bring your mics on, please. Welcome to the Sugar Land City Council Workshop for Tuesday, August 23rd. Item number 2, public comment. Thomas, anybody signed up? Nobody. No public comment. Item number 3, the workshop. 3A, review of and discussion on stormwater compliance fee. We have Georgie, you let them talk you into this too? So we have today Brian Butcher, Director of Public Works, and they dragged Georgia Tate, our environmental manager, into this thing.
Our favorite trash lady.
After the have to do trash, she got stuck with this too. That ain't right, guys. That ain't right. That just ain't right. Go ahead, Brian.
So we're gonna talk about a few things here this evening. I'm going to start with 4 slides that you've seen before, all tied to actually to Scott's general fund budget, and then I'm going to get into the mechanics of a stormwater fee, kind of why we're doing it, and how we would build a model around the stormwater fee. It's kind of a technical component, and then I'm going to hand it over to Georgia. She's really going to handle the community engagement, the community outreach, our plan for how we plan to communicate this information.
The heavy lifting part.
The real part, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah, yes, sir. I will say we have some one specific item we need feedback on, and I'll lay that out. But we're always open to any feedback on any of this. So starting right off the bat, kind of what got us here and why we're here. This is a slide, like I said, these first are from Scott's general fund presentation. This is a slide that I've seen all the way back to the FY22. There are certain pressures on the general fund right now, as well as a number of initiatives that have been identified by the council. And we have to come up with a way to generate $3 million in recurring revenue, right? Because a lot of these initiatives include recurring costs. We have to come up with a way to identify $3 million in additional recurring revenue in order for us to meet the projections of the 5-year forecast. And as you all know, in addition to having these initiatives and needing to identify this additional revenue, our reliance on sales tax is not sustainable, and all the other things, all the other pressures we're seeing out there, the inflation, the compensation needs, as well as the caps on taxes and the operational and capital increases as things start to get more expensive. This is a slide that shows that previous slide kind of with dollars on it, and what it shows here is if we don't build this stormwater fee into the general fund, or the revenue from this stormwater fee into the general fund, that the 5-year outlook does show that we are below policy. I think, again, Scott showed you this. In the final budget for this year, the expenditures stay the same, but the revenues actually go up by $1.1 million in FY23 and $2.2 million in the out years. All of that is directly attributable to a stormwater compliance fee and the revenue that it would ultimately generate. And again, this is all from Scott's general fund that was filed earlier this month. So why a stormwater compliance fee? Why is that the decision for generating this additional money? So as we talked about, the stormwater program currently is 100% in the general fund. It is not in this iteration of it does not include any sort of capital improvements. Currently and historically, we've funded large drainage projects with bond issuances. But this is the day-to-day O&M of almost 250 miles of storm sewer pipe, but so much more than that. All the inlets, and I'll get into what this 2.2 really funds here in just a minute. But we need to find a way to fund that. And like we just talked about, there's a lot of pressure on the general fund to also fund other initiatives, other things that we feel like we need for the city. But also, one of the pressures that comes with this is that a good portion of this program is unfunded mandate in the form of an MS4, a stormwater compliance permit that Georgia and her team are responsible for making sure we stay in compliance. So we have this need that's this recurring cost on the general fund that we know we're going to have that is tied to a permit, but also over time that permit may change. And this affords us an opportunity to build some transparency about the cost of compliance with respect to that permit. And then again, back down to the opportunities is dedicated funding sources important for major infrastructure, our water infrastructure, our wastewater infrastructure. We have that dedicated funding. This is very similar to that in that it needs its own dedicated source. And then as time goes on and as the program needs to continue, this affords us the opportunity to build in that transparency. So with that, those are the reasons. That's kind of where we're at and why we're here and why the stormwater fee is the recommended path for opening up the opportunity within the general fund for us to pursue those initiatives. Let's talk a little bit about how you would actually create a stormwater fee technically. It's pretty simple at its absolute highest level. We would start by identifying service levels, meaning what is it that we're funding? How much does it cost? Why are we doing that? Word customers got enlarged. I did not do that. I'm going to blame the internet. Eligible customers and how would we go about identifying who is charged this fee? And then finally, I have impervious area, but that's really meant to be the equitable distribution of that fee. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. But if we can break down those three and build those three into a model, we can come up with a recommended fee for achieving the financial needs. So let's start with the service levels. Right off the bat, I said it's $2.2 million. This program right now includes all of Georgia's team's compliance stuff, which is all their reporting, all of their monitoring, all of the things that are called out there. It includes our routine maintenance for, like I said, over 250 miles of pipe, almost 1,700 inlets throughout the city. It also includes all of our mosquito spraying, all of our street sweeping. We have a number of stormwater monitors and ditches throughout the city. This is all of the contracts for that. So it's everything that we do to maintain the drainage infrastructure across the city outside of large capital drainage programs and everything that Georgia's team does to maintain compliance with our MS4. So that's the first component. What's the service level? This is the service level as it sits today. The next component is who are the eligible customers? The state law with respect to stormwater fees says you cannot exempt single-family residential or commercial. And commercial includes multifamily, but single-family residential or commercial. You have to exempt states, properties undeveloped, and university properties. And then you, as a city or as an entity, get to decide about whether or not to exempt churches, cities, ISDs, and counties slash lids here is what we have in here. We're recommending that, well, we have it run in two ways. The original recommendation that came before the Finance and Audit Committee was to exempt those four under the pretense that they aren't currently paying property taxes, and so they're not currently contributing to the general fund, and we're trying to relieve pressure from the general fund. Part of the feedback we got from Finance and Audit was, yes, you're right that they're not, but if you were to charge it to a city, a school, or a lid, or a county, they're going to just simply pass that right back to the residents in the form of more taxes. A church is not going to handle it in that way. So there was a discussion about whether or not to exempt churches, and what I'm going to show you is the model run both with and without churches on there, and I'm looking for some feedback on whether or not we accept it. All right, so before I move on, we've got the service levels, the cost to do the service. We've got single family and commercial have to be in there, and a logical reason for why we would exempt these other properties. And now we need to figure out what is an equitable way to go about distributing this. And we see cities that just charge a flat fee. We see cities that charge all different ways. We worked on what we thought was the most equitable way, and that is by developing an impervious cover calculation for every single home and commercial business in the city. And what I've got on the right here is a lot of words. What I wanted to show you is this is one of the FAQs that currently lives on our website about this program that outlines very simply, I think, the definition of impervious cover. This is a screenshot up here of homes in the Imperial area. And what you'll see is we did GIS work to accurately and individually calculate how much impervious area each one of those parcels has, each residence has. And that is defined as, the rooftops, the driveways, the pools, the things that are that when rain falls on them, they don't go into the ground. It actually makes it out to the surface, and in fact is the impact on the stormwater system. Okay, we did it for not just residential, right? We did it for all different types. This is you can see this is Station 4 in the Parks building over on Boston Parkway, maybe 5. We also had some areas where there were parcels that had county next to churches, next to commercial. I just wanted to show that we have it all broken out. Every single parcel has its own individual impervious cover calculation for the impact that it has on the storm sewer system. Again, the whole reason we did this was about equity and about making sure that if we just charged a flat fee to every single customer, every single parcel would get the same thing. And what you see up there on the left is the parcel count. You can see how significant the single-family residential parcel count is compared to the rest of the city. But if you look to the right, it's done off the percentage of impervious cover. And what you can see there is the commercial is a very small piece of the pie, but its actual impact to the storm sewer system is much greater. So we didn't think that it was equitable to just charge everybody the same. We actually looked at those impervious cover calculations to make a determination on how much impact they're having on the storm sewer system. So those are the three components, right? The service levels, who's in and who's exempt, and then what's their pro rata share of their impact. We put all of that into a model that looks at generating $2.2 million a year based off of the financial projections. We're not planning or proposing to start this till January, so it wouldn't generate the full 2.2 in the first year, and that's important because when I show you the model runs, it only generates 1.6 because that's only in January. We proposed around 3 residential tiers, right, to break up the overall impact to the smaller homes. And we did, in this first model run, exempt churches, school districts, city property, and county and lit properties. We're going pretty fast, okay, all right? The 3 residential tiers up here, just bear with me for a second, it goes from 0 to 3,500 square feet. Now that's of impervious cover, that's not home square footage. About 10,687 homes live in this tier, and their proposed rate would be $2.02 a month. 3,500 to 4,800 is almost 14,000 would be $3.02 a month, and then above 4,801 would be $4.52. Those would be the 3 residential tiers, all total equaling right at about $1 million. And then taking that same logic and applying it to commercial, we end up with the commercial component of that being about another 639. And that's looking at every commercial property across the city. The one difference here is if you watch this 3.02, if we don't exempt churches, that 302 goes down to 296, so about a 6-cent difference, and the churches end up generating about 32,000 of that overall revenue. Just wanted to show y'all some kind of benchmarks. There's over 100 of these across the state. Some benchmarks of some other cities in the state. Here is ours at 3.02 for residential. Also, this is small commercial. What I mean by small commercial would be a convenience store or I would say Whataburger or something like that, a fast food place. And then we also have the big box, large commercial here. And it, again, is significantly less than some of these cities like Houston and College Station and San Marcos, where they are, in fact, using this to do capital projects. So, yeah, with this fee, the whole. So, as for today, that's and again, Georgia's going to get into the communication and what we plan to share and how we plan to share it and who we plan to share it with. But for today, we proposed to the Finance and Audit Committee that we would begin in January a stormwater compliance fee. It would have these 3 residential tiers, and it would exempt these 4 customer classes. Again, with looking for some feedback on the benefits of not including churches. So,
why don't we hear from the audit committee, and then let's hear from the council members before we go to the communications plan. Anybody?
Oh,
Go ahead, sir.
go ahead. So we talked about a lot in finance and audit, this plus a lot, because I liked how you began to tell us what all goes into that stormwater fee. And I think that's very important that people understand that's not just street sweeping, it's a lot.
yes, sir.
And I would love to see that list, and I'm sure Georgia will produce that list for the people to really understand what's going into that fee. So we covered that. But you also covered, or we also covered, related to the 10-10-10 on the water, how there was, correct me if I'm wrong, there was a little, are we able to talk about that?
I was looking at Meredith.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about, so correct. On Thursday morning, Scott is going to lay out the utility fund for y'all, and in the information we covered in the Finance and Audit Committee, the 3rd year of the 10-10-10 plan is being reduced. At least is being reduced down to 7 as opposed to 10,
Which helps simply alleviate some of this in a way.
Yes, and I think you're right in line with what Scott will be showing y'all is that this is all these fees together make up your overall the overall need for the residents. And you're right, that $10 being shifted back down to 7 does align with this.
And please excuse my developer ignorance here. Those developers here at the room deal with it. Retaining pond or retention pond, whatever that term is. And I'm going to use a business in our community we all know that's large, Walmart.
Yes.
And I'm assuming they have some sort of a retention area. Now, are they given any latitude because they have that as it relates to the impervious decision for their parking lots and roof? Well, hey, it's really not as big because they have it. I don't know, how does all that
No, so the short answer is no.
Okay.
What you're saying is the square footage of pavement maybe reduced by some amount because they have this. So the pond itself, as long as it's not concrete, if it's grass or gravel, it would not be into the calculation. But ultimately, all of that stormwater does make it into our system. So we treated it as though it's just about the velocity at which it makes it into our system, and the size of the overall system would have to be greater if we had a greater velocity. But ultimately, all of that water does make it to us.
So in a way, if it weren't there, their impervious, their rating would be larger, or
if they were to, instead of having that pond have more parking, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Sorry, thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, the conversation around these exempt properties. The thing about school district, city, property, county lids, if we exempt taxing authorities, that means that if we don't exempt taxing authorities, then they just pass it along some other way, and the taxpayers, individual taxpayers, eventually pay for it. The question around churches was, why? I mean, we've got not-for-profits. Not-for-profit owns a building, they're not exempt. What about religious-owned hospitals? And what actually is a religious organization? Who's going to make that decision whether or not we have religious organizations? So I think if we cut it off at taxing entities are the only exempt ones, it's clean, it makes sense, there's no gray area, we don't set any precedents, and it's spread out, $32,000 spread out over a lot of institutions. I can't speak for any because I haven't experienced everything that everyone in the universe has, but it's a small amount per customer, per religious customer. That's what I'm saying. It's not a like we're adding a huge burden. So that's why I think we should only be exempting taxing authorities. I mean, how else do you draw a line?
So I thought that moving it to a fee, then it takes it out of the big pool of the operating fund, so that it doesn't just get lost when we're trying to explain. So it does provide a higher level of transparency as to what we're spending on this unfunded mandate.
Thoughts? Council?
And no thoughts on what they've discussed, but the only other thing is senior citizens. Is there a way that we can exempt senior citizens, those above the age of 65? I don't know what the numbers are, but just putting a burden, they may not use the most water, but I mean, their fee may be $2, but then it's $25 a year. Is there a way of looking at senior citizens?
I'm a senior, and I can't support that. I mean, and I don't think that we give the seniors, over 65, we give a homestead exemption. I don't think this is, burden asking them to share their pro rata share. I think as our population ages, I think it ends up being like a double declining balance that we don't want to get into. Stuart, to your point, it makes sense on the tax exempt entities. I'm fine with churches being charged. I mean, if I were a church, I'm paying my water bill. I need to pay my, I'm paying, I don't get billed property taxes. I get that. But I think that's fine that they should participate in this.
We have a long tradition in the United States of exempting churches from property taxes, but we don't have exemptions for city services.
Wait.
You're a senior? Wow.
I know it's hard to believe.
Wait, is that my question? No, I did want to add to that.
I know it's hard to believe.
As these numbers were put before us, and I looked at them and I thought, well, there are people in here that never attend in our city that don't attend the church. And if we exempt the churches, they're paying for the church's stormwater fee. So that was part of mine. I do attend churches here locally, and to the mayor's point, I don't see this being a huge burden, but I see it being fair. And I do want to be fair in all these.
And they're not going to pass it down, but the other entities would pass it down. So
I agree.
It's fair.
I had a question. How did you come up with the break between 1 and 2, tier 1 and 2 at 3,500, and break the tier 2 and 3 to break that at 4,800? Just sort of curiosity, how you came up with that number, because it doesn't leave the same.
Well, it's really broken by percentages. So it's a 30, 40, 30. So 30% in the first tier, 40% in the second tier, 30% in the third tier.
The normal distribution.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so Pearland doesn't have the stormwater fee?
No, they don't. They looked at one about a year ago and decided that they would actually put it out to the voters on their drainage.
Okay. And why San Marcos is so high? Did you get any feedback?
Yeah, so I did look at that one. That was actually some of the questions we got asked was why are some so low, why are some so high, and the reason some are so low are really you start to see the low ones it's the West Texas cities, and they have caps on the commercial stuff. They just have a completely different stormwater infrastructure than us. San Marcos and College Station, I did look through theirs. they are selling debt. So they're doing millions of dollars of capital improvements with this fee. And we're not planning to do that at this time.
What's next to Henry Rainey, Brian?
And it's not an apples to apples on stormwater infrastructure. Okay. I'm going to turn it over to Georgia. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Brian.
Oh.
I didn't do that either. As Brian mentioned, I handle the compliance side of stormwater, which is actually one of the hardest things to explain to our residents. So this actually gives us the perfect opportunity to educate our residents on what stormwater is, how the infrastructure is maintained, and how we remain in compliance with TCEQ. So Brian's team has done all of the hard work with the numbers. Now I get to do the really fun part, which is the transparency and the communication with the public. And you'll see that this is in alignment with the solid waste education that's coming later this year. It's the perfect opportunity for us to provide as much information to the residents as possible. So we have 4 campaign goals for the stormwater fee. The first is to educate. Make sure the residents understand what stormwater is, what our programs are that help protect and maintain our stormwater system, but also explaining and educating them how the fee is going to impact them on a monthly basis, on an annual basis. We're also looking to build trust through the explanations on the decision making from the city. All the decisions that Brian just explained to you, all of the decisions that you're making, working on explaining that to the residents as well as to the business community. Then assuring our business owners and residents by answering their questions and walking them through somewhat complicated information to make it as simple and easy to understand as possible. And finally, reinforcing the importance of sustainably funding this program. Councilmember Lane mentioned the transparency. Having a dedicated stormwater fund secures stormwater funding for the future for the city. There are 3 key messages that we're working on. You will see a nice list of the services that are included. First key message is that we are providing a sustainable, dedicated revenue source for operating our stormwater management program, and that includes the cost of compliance for an unfunded state mandate for our MS4 permit. The MS4 permit requires municipalities to implement best management practices and reduce our stormwater pollution. My team does a lot with that reporting and that monitoring. Brian's team does a lot to maintain the infrastructure so that pollution doesn't occur. The fee will also fund stormwater management services, including the top item there is the TCEQ and MS4 compliance. That's my side of the house. But then everything else is on Brian's side of the house. So the existing drainage system operations, our inlet inspections, we actually inspect the inlets and then we go mark them so that residents don't pour things down the inlets. Mosquito spraying, mosquito trapping and testing, all of the ditch flow monitoring equipment that Brian mentioned, and our flood gauges. So this information will all be shared with our residents as well as with the business community. On the residential side, I mentioned before, we will be collaborating with the solid waste education campaign that's going to be going on this fall. With in-person engagement opportunities through our district town halls, we're planning a solid waste open house, which is going to be a huge community event where we can reach residents, families, kids, our elderly population, to educate them on the changes that are coming, but also educate them on the fees and what the impact is going to be to their monthly bill. We'll also be attending the quarterly HOA meetings and other community events. So we've told the HOAs, if you want us to talk to you, we'll be there. But also preparing council for things like National Night Out, where you could get questions from residents. We have many other engagement tools that our amazing communications team utilizes on a daily basis. We'll be utilizing a water bill notification, so every resident sees it on their water bill, whether that bill is mailed to them or if they utilize it on our online portal. We'll also be utilizing a direct mailer. So every resident will receive to their home an explanation of the stormwater fee. We'll also be updating our website content, which is already live, so that residents can find information on the proposed fee. So if they hear about it, that information is currently available to them. Our team is putting out news releases, listservs, Social media is going to be incredibly useful over the next few months. And then again, connecting all of this to the 2023 utility rates. So residents can see what their utility fee is going to be for their water usage, what their stormwater fee is going to be because of their impervious cover, and then what their solid waste rate is going to be with the new contract. On the commercial side, we're going to go even heavier with the in-person engagement because those commercial properties, the impact is a little bit higher on their monthly bills. With individual meetings before and after city council consideration, targeting those businesses that request a meeting with us so that Brian or myself or someone else on our team can walk them through everything like we just walked you through it. Also targeting those large businesses that are going to be paying the most, and then targeting those small businesses that they've never had a stormwater fee on their bill. It looks like a change for them, and walking them through it as well. We'll be doing quite a bit with our economic development department. They have many events that we'll be attending to provide information to our commercial businesses, and also participating in our stormwater education request that the stormwater program is currently doing with our businesses. There will be some other in-person opportunities that are focusing more on exemptions. And so working with our lids and muds, meeting with the school districts, or notifying the school districts to let them know that they are in fact exempt, and then meeting with the churches to walk them through what the bill is going to look like for them, walking them through the impervious cover, and then meeting with the HOAs and the management companies. Any questions on commercial? We have a few other of those engagement tools, the same that we use on the residential side, we'll be using on the commercial side. One important note is that we have sent out a form for the commercial businesses to submit a meeting request, where if they want to meet one-on-one with a member of the city, we will come out, meet with them, walk them through everything that impacts their monthly costs, their annual costs. That's something that we haven't done before, and so we're really excited about it, for them to actually work with us to speak with as many of them as possible. Just to give you an overall summary, the subject matter experts for the stormwater compliance fee are, again, Brian's team from Public Works and then my team from Environmental and Neighborhood Services. But we are partnering with multiple city departments. We'll be partnering with City Council to get your help to help us explain this information to your neighbors and your constituents. We'll be partnering with communications, as you've already seen. They are the heavy hitters here. Community engagement will be assisting us as well. 311 will be answering all the questions when residents call. Economic development is really helping with the commercial entities. Budget is always very helpful. Treasury will be helping with the fees as well, answering those questions whenever residents do get a bill. We're actually partnering with the fire department to talk about hot topics. And so residents think they're coming to meet firefighters, but we're also going to be sharing some exciting information about hot topics in Sugar Land. And finally, we're partnering with engineering as they help us reach out to those other groups that are exempt. Any questions about the communication strategy?
Everybody okay with this? Carol?
Okay. In case I'm asked, because I probably will be, so the TCEQ compliance requirements they're obviously the unfunded mandate. Is that the only component of the stormwater fee that's the unfunded mandate, or the other six?
I think it's the Clean Water Act.
Oh, so, okay. But the other 6 services that we provide, those are part of the stormwater fee, but they're not part of the unfunded mandate. Is that correct?
Yes, so there's actual multiple services compiled within the MS4 permit. We just spelled it out as the MS4 permit, the compliance. There's actually many services that are included within that. We just kind of lumped them all together and then separated out all of the ones that are taken care of by Public Works. But the compliance side of it, there are numerous monitorings, lots of reporting, lots of work that our staff does.
Carol is the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination Service. And the Clean Water Act. It's federal government.
Yeah. Oh, right. Okay.
It's TCEQ is merely the enforcement vehicle.
Okay. For the federal
government.
Okay. Thanks.
I have one more thought, but it's more of a circle back. Brian may have to jump back in here for a second. But George may be able to answer. As I'm sitting here through this list of those that are exempt, and we talk about the muds and the lids, That's not even a large impact, impervious large impact, correct? Because we're talking about buildings and parking lots for muds and lids. Is that what we're referring to?
So the very, very vast majority of lid property is grass, right? It's levees. So yes, you're right. You're right.
Well, and I'm just processing it through for future questions. And as people may or may not watch this and see, well, why would you do that? The more I think about it, now not every community would have a mud, but if I may, I'm going to throw that out there. But even if they had, it would be driveways, right? I mean, we're talking about very, very small impact.
Correct. Specifically with
it's not like exempting the big box stores. We're talking about very small impact.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Good.
Going off on the side here, but speaking of lids, do we have like a grand master plan with the Corps of Engineers with the levee system along the Brazos, particularly with the city of Sugar Land? I mean, we had talked about that before, we're working as a regional plan on that, because it came up at a baseball game where between different lids within the city, some of the levees are getting compromised by hogs, or some may be higher than others, and there's the concern some of the residents. So,
as fascinating as that might be, the grand master plan with the levees do not really relate to your stormwater. And we need to stay on topic, please.
okay.
Good try.
Really, the question is on topic. Brian, this may be for you as well, but so since we spoke about the churches and bringing them back in, obviously they don't fit in the residential. Do they fit in this small commercial price point area?
So I showed two versions of the model, and in one version I showed a church component. The calculation for each individual church was done the same way we calculated a commercial property. It's their share of the impervious coverage. We use
it's
their
not
ratio.
They're not grouped in tiers. It is what they're
Correct. It's calculated the same way commercial.
So if I'm a church, I'm just trying to get an idea. If I'm a small commercial tract, 25,000 square foot, I'm going to pay approximately $18.12. I get it. If I'm a resident, I pay $3.02. What is an approximate impact on a church? And I know that can vary, but is there and maybe you haven't done the numbers?
No, we have, but I don't have any of those numbers at my fingertips. But it's definitely less than that 800,000 that I showed you. There were no churches within that. It's significantly less than that.
I don't think many are above 25,000 square feet. There are a few.
I would be guessing if I answered that right here, but we can definitely find that out. Yes, absolutely. We've got it.
I just want to make sure it's not a $200 fee to a church. If it's a $20 fee, a $24 fee, it just makes sense to me.
It might be a $200 fee to a large church.
Very large.
Yes.
Yeah, a 300,000 square foot church.
Very possible. Yeah.
I don't think
some of those churches have very big parking lots, so yes, it's possible.
That's true.
And what if we had a resident that qualifies as a church? Is that a possibility in our city?
So
I mean, some people have their homes registered as churches.
We're still sharing.
So a couple of things. I can answer that, I think. So first of all, we used what the tax roll has those properties identified as, right? So we have them. Now, if you are identified as a resident and you say, I'm now a church, we can convert you over. It's still going to be based off of your impervious cover. So if it's a house, it's just a house, it's going to pay about what a house would pay. If it's a house with a huge parking lot, it's going to have to pay what the commercial rate would be, what a church would pay. So it's again, because we do the GIS work, it fixes itself.
And I ask that because there are some homes that are owned by churches, and they're not really residential, they're homes owned by churches, which qualify as tax exempt.
So if you're speaking of like parsonages and things like that, we would classify those as residential. Yeah.
So I'm getting the impression the new word of the day is going to be impervious. That's something I need to learn how to spell as well.
And pronounce.
That's one.
You got it
Not to worry, you'll figure it out.
George will help.
Georgia.
Just explain the Clean Water Act and you're good.
Okay.
Help us understand that.
Yes, that's what we're here for. So just to give you a summary of what this fall is going to look like in terms of stormwater compliance fee. It's going to be very busy. We're going to need your help to communicate this information at these public events, and so we'll be providing toolkits to you so that if a resident asks you a question, you can answer those questions and you can pronounce words like impervious. I will be there to help you out along the way, and that's it. Any other questions?
Yeah. Everybody good? Item number 4, City Council City Manager Report, 4A. William, let's start with you.
Oh, goodness. You caught me off guard. I looked at my calendar. I have no report.
Jennifer?
Attended the ski game with all our kids.
Oh, good. Sir?
I hosted a ball game for some internal departments at the city.
Carol?
I attended, I think, the 4th Fort Wayne County Lid 2 board meeting, at which I spoke, and I thought getting tired of me, but it's okay, I keep coming back. I hosted the Citizens Legislative Task Force at Constellation. Game got rained out, but we had fun the short time we were there. And then I attended the opening of the new sculpture exhibit at the Art Museum of Texas Sugarland, right here in Town Square, and featured the artwork of 50 artists across Texas.
Michelle?
No report.
Suzanne?
I can't stand the next girl, no report. She wins.
We hosted this being Cindy Deeds, Rick Romero, Cindy's husband Ben. Nancy and I hosted Senator Cole Course, her husband Jimmy, Representative Ronald Reynolds, and Snapper Carl. And that was Saturday night for a ball game, and we got smoked. Really got smoked. But it was a great discussion, and let's just say it's going to be an interesting session. Mike?
No report.
Motion to adjourn.
At 6:10.
Congratulations,
Council.
Yeah. I think, yeah.
I said, Brian went over a minute.